Welcome back to Volvo at ConExpo Live. With electric equipment so new to the construction industry, we get a lot of questions related to machine charging. How long do they take to charge, and how long does that charge last? Now, it's really just a few of the more common questions that we've heard, but there are so many more. And luckily, we have an expert joining us to help answer these questions and a lot more related to charging electric construction equipment. Najing Li is Product Manager of Sustainable Power at Volvo Construction Equipment. Thank you for taking the time to join us here.
Thank you for having me today, Linda. It's glad to be here. When we're talking about the electrification, the core part of the electrification is the battery. The battery is like human being, you and me. We need to eat, we need to work, we also need to sleep, right? So charging for the battery is actually like human being need to eat the food. So you can either have a sit down in a restaurant, nice dinner with your family, or it's for battery that is AC charging, or you can similar to have me like with me today is the energy bar. So for the battery, that is actually called DC fast charging. So for the AC charging, you can charge it for 6 hours, and that gives you like the 6 hours of the runtime for our machine. So during the lunch break, you can also use the DC charger, like the energy bar also to go to fulfill your afternoon energy, right? And for that, you can juice it up to 80% within 1 hour for the excavator, 2 hours for the wheel loader. And for a 23-ton excavator, you can use the DC charging to 80% within 1 hour. That actually gives you 4.5 hours of the runtime. Another common question I got is, what kind of charger can I use? And what kind of power setup I can use to charge those machines? So what kind of charger we can use? So for the compact machine, it all comes with a J-plug. It's a standard type of connector used in the automotive for the AC slow charging. For the AC charging, you can use the standard power supply for the residential or commercial area, same like your house. You can have the 110 single phase or the split phase 240 volt with NEMA 1450 breakers. It's same like use it in your house for the oven and also the dryers. So for the DC fast charging side, we will separate into two parts. We have the 48 volt system, which will use the DIN plug. It requires the 3-phase 408 volt system. Or for the 600 volt system, it comes with the CCS Type 1 plug. So for that, you can either use the 3-phase 480 volt or use the split phase 240 volt.
Now, I assume there are different charging strategies depending on the type of work someone is doing. Do you have any tips or best practices that will keep electric machines up and running longer?
So typically, there's 3 tips I would give. So for the first one it's an electric machine. So it comes with an electric motor. Typically represent very powerful. So on your work mode, try to adjust it to eco mode. So that's powerful enough to get your job done. Also, it's not draining your battery so fast. The second tips I would give is to turn on your regenerative braking. So basically, it captures the energy otherwise will be wasted. Instead, it uses the energy to charge the battery. And it also reduce the wear and tears on your brake. And the third point I would point it out is use the opportunity charging. During the lunch break, when the machine is sitting there, don't let it just sit there. Charge the machine. You can get your 4-day squeezing by doing that.
So what tips do you have for charging and operating electric machines in cooler weather?
So the battery has the temperature dependency. When the temperature gets cold, it's like human being, you try to swim in a lake from point A to point B. When the temperature gets below freezing, the water gets sluggish. Same as a battery. The chemical reaction within the battery, it gets slowed down. So for our machine, the operating temperature range and AC slow charging range is 14 to 104 Fahrenheit. When the temperature drops below freezing point, the DC fast charging will be totally cut off. It's a protectionism from the battery management unit. The battery needs to brought up to a moderate temperature before they can start charging again. As we mentioned earlier, battery has the temperature dependency. So first of all, try to bring the machine indoors because the temperature we're talking about 14 to 104 Fahrenheit. Those are talking about the battery temperature. If you can put the machine indoors, it actually takes way longer for the machine to be that cold. The second point I would say is to use the preconditioning. EV owners, you are very familiar with that function. It's basically on the software, you can set it up when to warm up your cap. Essentially, it's warming up the cap from the power outlet instead of draining the energy from the battery.
So Volvo has a variety of charging products in the booth this week. Can you give us a quick overview of those options?
So at ConExpo, we actually bring 5 charging solution with us here to date. So we have the Benning 48 volt DC fast charging. What we are literally standing on is the Bing EV Arc. And we also have the Helios for the mobile DC fast charging. We also have the FreeWire for the 600 volt charging solution. Most important of all, before you picking the charging solution is actually to determine what's your potential use case. Because for each of the use case, it would differ in terms of the runtime, your payroll, and access to public charging infrastructures. At Volvo, we work with a partner for a closed-loop electric products offering. So it depends on the job site you're going to, do they have power accessibility or not? We have different product portfolio for it. If you are working on a job site do not have power accessibility, what we offer the product is actually you can bring the power to the machine. It's basically a mobile battery bank you carry with it. So this is basically offered by Portable Electric. You mounting the battery bank on a trailer. So it comes with a 2 AC level 2 charging port. You can fully charge our machine overnight. You can charge 4 excavator from empty to full or 2 wheel loaded. Another solution is since we're in Vegas, it's a sunny day here, you can use the solar panel. It's from the Bing EV Arc. Basically, you convert the solar energy to electricity. And the electricity got storage here. And then also coming with 2 of the AC charging port. So you can charge your machine, 2 of them at the same time overnight. So if the job site you're working, they have the power supplied, then your life is way more easier. You can either doing the AC slow charging or the DC fast charging, right? The AC slow charging, you can use our J plug. It has an adapter. You can use either 110, as we said earlier, or the 240 volt split phase. For the DC fast charging, we need to separate into 2 parts. Since for our compact machine, we will use the Benning 48 volt system. So it would request the 3-phase 408 volts power supplied. So we also, for the 600 volt, we can use the Helios. Basically, it's a portable DC charger. The power output is 50 kilowatt. It can charge our EC230 23-ton excavator 3.5 hours to 80%. The last but not least is the FreeWire. It's basically a battery integrated inside a charging station. So you can use this FreeWire charging station if you don't need to have like higher heavy duty of the power input. Instead, you can use either like in this car area, use a 240 volt split phase, and then you can basically charge the battery, and then the battery have the booster to charge your machine. So for that, you can charge a 23-ton excavator for 1 hour, and you are just up to 80%.
And one final question. What is the general outlook on charging infrastructure development globally? And since we're here in Vegas, more specifically, what's the general outlook for North America?
A few years ago, the main questions customers have when purchasing an electric vehicle is price and range. We typically hear about the range anxiety, right? Today, the number one concern is actually the charging anxiety. Is there have enough public charging station out there I can charge my vehicle during my road trip? To keeping pace with the rapid growth interest of electrification, vast network of public accessible charging stations need to be built and put in use in very short order. As we can see, it's a joint effort by the public sector and the private sector, driven by the worldwide aim to reduce carbon emissions. On the public sector side, you can see that pioneer countries like European Union, China, and in the States, governments have announced plans to heavily invest on the public charging infrastructure. The Biden administration proposed a plan to build 500,000 of the public charging stations by 2030 with a focus on the underserved and rural area. Also, the Inflation Reduction Act announced last year, the government is offering the tax incentive and rebate to encourage the consumer to buy electric vehicles. In turn, that also drives the demand for the charging infrastructure. On the private sector side, we started to see companies are teaming up with each other. So we have the partnership within the industry and across the industry. In Europe, Volvo with Daimler Truck and VW Group are building the public charging infrastructure for the electric truck. And also on the car side, we have the company called Ionity. It's a joint venture of the German Big Three and Ford, building the high-speed charging infrastructure along the European highways. So in the States, we have Tesla, which is a car company build the public charging infrastructure before they sell the electric cars. And also the Electrify American and EVgo's. They're also building the public charging infrastructure and also invest heavily in the research and development for new charging technologies to bring the cost down and increase the charging speed. Overall, countries are aiming to build charging infrastructure to support the transition to electrification. With a heavy investment into the charging infrastructure and talents from the public and private sector, the outlook for the charging infrastructure is positive.
Thank you for talking more about electric machine charging and for sharing some best practices. I know it's top of mind for everyone considering buying or even renting an electric machine. Since speaking of charge, our electric operating arena has been very active all week. So to hear more about how all the attendee competitions and test drives are going, stick around and find out next.